Federico, Brenda, and friends and visitors, thanks for coming. I studied at this art school from 1970. And if it hadn't been for all the fights we had, I would have known half the things I know. I think it's fairly healthy for people at an art school to experience a sense of conflict, but within reason. But the sense of conflict teaches one that there are different points of view and that you should be careful who you trust, and teaches you to think for yourself so that you can have a leg to stand on. It helps you to form your own independent opinion. If you just do as you are told, you might have the most wonderful lecturers and teachers and masters. But those very well-informed people might eventually become your nemesis, your downfall. You've got to break free from them. As my one of my favorite sculptors, Brancusi, used to say, nothing grows in the shadow of the big trees. You've got to find your own legs to stand on. So I broke free a little bit from the type of painterly style that we were first taught, and opted to become a little bit more conceptual. And in the 1974, 1975, there were very few conceptualists in the country. Michael Gilbert to Australia, Claude van Lingen then went to New York. We don't really know if Bob Jensma can be called a conceptualist. He was more of a poet, but he vanished. And then Malcolm Payne made some identity cards. He changed his attack on the art world and started making these big, garish purple sculptures on the wall. So the thing becomes very sketchy, and very few people were interested. It was a conceptualist tendencies were a load of nonsense, and we were copying from books and following international trends. I think one has to be brave enough to sift a lot of chaff from whatever. So that little thing you think you're looking at is a little cube, which I thought I'd make a cube in my head by just concentrating and starting off with solid shapes and trying to find a way in which I can break it up so that it's, when it's closed, it's 100% solid, and when it's opened up, it becomes like a city. I started messing with my head in the context of what we were taught. I lived in Hillbrow, and I wanted to make big stuff, and there was not enough space. And I had no money for material, so I used to pick up these little bits of planks from the sculpture workshop and then design a sculpture that would slip through my front door. When it was inside the flat where I lived, it would fit in there, and I could use it as a coffee table, but then occasionally when I wanted to see it, I could unfold it and it would become a city. It would become the Hillbrow in which I lived. I lived in Hillbrow. So it was kind of a futuristic city. So I used to spin a lot of that. You know, like you first make stuff, eventually you make up ideas about the stuff. So this thing landed up becoming the New Jerusalem. It became whatever one would want to spin. This was 1977, and that's when I wrote that dictionary of colour. Now, being a South African, if you write a dictionary of colour, people would think something, but it was more of an honest colour dictionary, actually looking at colour shapes, colour that actually existed. So I went to all the paint shops and found colour charts and made my dictionary. But I actually also wrote from the dictionary the words for colour, different words. Like the word glaucous, it means grey, green. Ecru, the colour of raw. If I remember some of the strange ones. Ecru, puce, the colour of a flea. That was my favourite one. And this work is now in the Pretoria Art Museum. Each colour is labelled. And then I went overseas, and before I went overseas, I actually wrote a book of poetry, the Kyk Afrikaans book of poetry, but I decided not to talk too much about Kyk Afrikaans. It's a subject for a whole exhausting evening. But I decided to learn what creativity was all about. I decided that somehow I have to bring the art into one's life, live it a little bit. So every day of the week, I would decide on 6 things that I had never done before. Creativity as an aspect of newness. So the top 2 on the left-hand side, you can see a date on the one. That's the back of it. Next to it, diagonally on the top left, the top 2, those are duties, things that one would have to do every day. But now, in order to be creative in one's duty, one would have to do it in such a way as you've never done before. So I'd have to sit 4 o'clock in the morning and figure out how to do these things. The next one would be pleasure. So how do you enjoy pleasures that you, in a way that you've never done, or certain pleasures you've even never enjoyed? And the last 2 on the bottom left-hand corner, those 2 little straight lines on the diagonal one, would be sacrifices. So I've set myself these tasks, 6 tasks a day. And on the right-hand side, I measured. Those little circles are targets. I say to myself now, this sacrifice, you've said to yourself, draw 6 lines on the ceiling. You've never done that before. There had no reason to do that either. From east to west, oh boy. And they must all be the same length, equidistant. Now, in the evening, I'd have to measure and say, did I find that an interesting exercise? Should I do that again? Did it teach me? And I measured it and carved the measurement in a block of wood. I used for every day a different species of wood. I was a sucker for punishment in those days. So I spent most of my time looking for different species of wood. And one day, for example, I remember that I sacrificed and said, you have to put your hand into the toilet and feel the substance of what's there. You become desperate, because if you have to think of a new thing every day, it's like so difficult. You try it for a few days in a row. It becomes impossible, and you do some ridiculous things, which are not so ridiculous in the end. You learn, and then I have to say what I thought of them. That was a portable workshop. I was in Europe when I started this on my birthday. And I would sit in the aeroplane with this portable workshop and put a cloth on my legs to catch all the little shavings. And I would take out the books, and draw my resolutions for whatever was going to happen in the aeroplane. I would have to think of 6 things to do in the aeroplane twice, because when we take off and when we land, every morning you'd have to figure these things out every day. And then if you spread the stuff and you start carving, everybody says, what the hell are you doing? Nowadays, if you take these punches and carving knives onto the aeroplane, they'll throw you off. That's my portable workshop. Those are the books that are 1982. And then when we finished it all those shavings that I'd collected went into these little drawers. I thought the pharaohs, when they went on the afterlife, took aspects of this life with them. So I was totally romantically linked with these things and lived them. And I collected all my savings and put them in the drawers. And all the plaques that I had carved, 370 of them, went into this thing that looked a bit like a building. Then in 1996, part of the problem of finding 370 different species of wood is that there are only maybe 20 species of wood available in the stores, and then for the rest of it you have to make very special plans. I joined the Dendrological Society and learned the names of all the local species in the veld. And I was only allowed to, of course, use dry and dead wood. I couldn't use green wood because it would crack, so I was looking for dead branches everywhere. And in order to do that, I started making lists and studying trees. And I remember you knock on the front door of somebody and you say to them that you see that there's a dead branch up there in their Christmas tree, and would they mind if you are interested in making a sculpture and it's dry, and you learn social skills to convince people that they have to help you. And at the end of it all, in good faith, I did 370. I think some people lied to me, because I'm not sure if some of those will pan out if you do DNA testing on them. But in all honesty, I did what I thought was 370. But then those lists began a new search of the names of plants. Now, I've been studying plants since before I went to school. I started making rockeries and little gardens in the backyard. And I love plants, and this thing with the wood rekindled this interest in trees and plants. And eventually later on, it is where the big Druid business comes from, because a Druid is a man of plants. So I think I became what all along, the things that I hold dear in nature is plants. And I think I became this thing which I had been in any case. So in 1982 I started my plant lists, and desperately looking for what's going on in nature, and I made a resolution that I would learn all the names of all the plants. And it's a bit silly because there are 400,000 plants. But I think being silly is part of the whole thing. You have to kind of do quixotic things. Don Quixote believed he could change the world with his with Rocinante, this trusted steed, the horse, which was old and decrepit, and with Sancho Panza, his right hand man. So I believe this, and I still believe I will make a difference, and I couldn't care a damn what anyone says. I'm having great fun. And this was 1996. I had studied and tried very hard to learn the names of 5,000 plants. So I showed, I had to show more or less how far I got. On the wall, there are some clipboards with places, all the places I visited. On the floor is a funeral thing. It's a hothouse. You know, hothouses have glasses and seeds are sown, but I linked it with the way plants are threatened with extinction. 30,000 plants are threatened with extinction, and I had only studied 5. And I only study real plants. I'm not allowed to put plants in my collection of what I had studied if I just get it from books or the internet. These are plants I actually had to see in real life, things that I one-on-one had contact with. So I wanted to show what it might look like if the 5,000 plants I knew suddenly vanished. It would be just labels that are left. There would be no real plants. So I started calling them gardens of words. This is the second garden of word project, and in this instance I had studied 10,000 plants, and I wanted to show what it would look like if 10,000 plants should vanish. So I was 1/3 of the way to 30,000 threatened with extinction. I made these little transparent blades of grass that blow in the wind. And this is in Denmark somewhere. So each flower bed that you see there is plastic, it's black perspex, and has 1,000 blades blowing in the wind. To remind us, it's kind of a memory thing, what it might be like if 10,000 plants vanished. We have soldiers that vanish in the war. We don't know what happened to them. And then we commemorate them in memorial gardens. So these are memorial gardens. We build stakes, put large sheets of granite, put their names on it. I want to remember the plants. Those are my things. I'm a man of plants. And then this was 15,000 plants I had studied in 2007. This was in Kirstenbosch main garden, and they had an international conference, economical conference in those buildings. And I remember seeing poppies in Yper in Belgium, growing amongst the gravestones. And the poppy becomes the symbol of soldiers that have needlessly or that have just vanished, lost their lives, that have been used by the political systems to fight for wars that ended senselessly. And they read the poppy, little Papava rosea, little red poppy. So I tried to put the little red poppy into there's a little cup, and into the cup I pushed the names of the plants I had studied. I wrote them on a little handkerchief, the names, and where they came from. So for me, it would be a personal loss if these things become extinct. And also, of course, a handkerchief is the thing that you use when you cry. So it's a sort of sign of abjection. So this work's been to France and all over. This is an etching. You can see better than I can. An etching of all the Highveld plants. I grew up on the Highveld, born in Van der Bijl Park, and spent lots and lots of time in the open field, looking for nondescript little plants everywhere. And these are all the names of all the plants where I grew up. It's an etching, it's called Highveld. I made these lists of plants to commemorate plants as if they had become extinct. I've now done more than 20,000 plants, and I should make Garden of Words 4 now. So I'm slowly working towards that. Garden of Words 5 will be 25,000, and then finally I will be finished when I make 30,000. I'm going to get there one day, over the halfway mark. This here is a house made of steel. The walls move, and they asked me to work with them with the plant ideas, and so I said, no, I'd like to also commemorate the plants that will never die out. Your potato is not going to die out, and your tomato. But those are not such romantic things as maybe persimmon or oregano or the herbs. So I made a garden of herbal plants. I call this, I worked with an architect. It's on the Vaal, on the Free State side of the Vaal, near Van der Bay where I grew up. And I call it the House of Herbs. So if you are in this side, there are two pavilions, Steel Pavilion and a Glass Pavilion. The Glass Pavilion, people tended to bruise their noses on the glass because you don't know that there's glass. So we had to put something. So I said, let's put grassy elements, so because people will think that they are in a reed bush. That's the Steel Pavilion, the Glass Pavilion. That's the bath of the Steel Pavilion. You can see the cast shadows, and if you're inside the Steel Pavilion, you can maybe read some strange in Hindi or Urdu or Gujarati language, all these strange scripts. You can read it on your arm. Or strange things happen because the shadows are cast all over. Like that. So, I write dictionaries. If you are English speaking and you've never heard any Afrikaans, this would be an English document. It's a Dada document because the words in the document were chosen completely arbitrarily, chosen by what is known as the laws of chance. So you'd see spoke, I mean if you start at the top left, male, bane, slap, snare, rower, vice, hole, sweet. But if you were Afrikaans and you had never ever heard of English, this would be a completely Afrikaans document. Every single word in this document would be Afrikaans. And it's a bit of a naughty document. Sometimes you get words like, for example, the word gulp. In Afrikaans, gulp is gulp, which is kind of the thing around your zipper in the lower anatomy. Or the word in English, wors, W-O-R-S-E. In Afrikaans, it means sausages, wors. So there's a naughtiness in many of the dictionaries I write. But it started off slightly differently. It started off in this institution when it was still in Masbury Court with some academics that traded a sort of slightly verbose English. The English intelligentsia would say, you know, have you heard of this solipsist attitude? And what's solipsism? Nobody would know what the hell solipsism was. So I thought, well, these others are making fun of us. And I then made a resolution to go through all the dictionaries I have and find all the difficult words and learn them. And I didn't tell anyone. I went at night and learned all the difficult words I could find. I made word lists, I bought tapes, and I went to every trouble I could go to learn difficult English. And then one day we had this strange thing happening. I kept quiet about what I was doing. For example, the thing that happened was in the staff room, you see it there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth word from the top. somebody asked, well, it seemed like they would think that if you didn't really know a kind of verbose English, that you were stupid. And of course I speak English with a terrible accent, so I was stupid. I thought we maybe, but then I thought now I'm going to make some sports with it. And they came up with a word in the staff room, throw it through and open to anyone. You guys, of course you know what myutics with an M. Similarly spelled to halieutics there, but with an M. Myutics is a term in philosophy, and most departments of philosophy will know the word. It's the Socrates method of extracting truth from his students by question and answer. It's so difficult to get the truth from the student. It's like giving birth. And a myutikos in Greek is a midwife. So you have to become a midwife. You have to reach in and deliver a baby. And I explained this, and I couldn't believe that anyone would know what myutics meant. Especially somebody with an accent, who speaks with English with an accent. So I made the naughty move. And then the naughty move was then to say, yes, but I want to ask you something. Do you know what halieutics is? No, I never ever heard the word halieutics myself until I had learned the meaning of it. And you can see it's just the art of fishing. And they were fishing that it might be philosophical in nature, and of course it's not. And then when finally I said, no, it's the art of fishing, they wouldn't believe it, and they had some very big dictionary in the back there, and they brought it out, and there it was. It's the art of fishing, deep sea fishing especially. So I made enemies. But then I thought, I'll take this further, and it was the Birth of Blind Alphabet, a project where I depend on the difficulty of words to make fun with people who think they know more and people who think they have no hope of becoming or being something. So I started playing a kind of strange political games. At first I wanted to build 10 large walls. Each wall would have 1,000 bricks. You are looking at 450 bricks, and of course 450 bricks on the other side, and at the two ends you'd have this, I think it's 50 or 50 or so. So altogether 1,000 bricks per wall. And on each wall I wanted to write an English word, like the word cataglottism. That's an English word. It's from Oxford, from the Oxford English Dictionary. And you can see what it means there. It's yes, you can see. You can see better than I can. It's a kind of kiss in which your tongues are twisting around. Like embarrassingly almost, but quite nice sometimes. And I also discovered that parrots have a habit of cataglottism. So there's a short list of some of the words, for example, that I would put on my walls. One wall would be a koza wall. It would have cataglottism and then an explanation in koza. And then it would have 1,000 words like that in koza. Explained in koza, but English words. So there is these clever, enfranchised English speakers. The walls had to be in a public place, like a Parliament Square, or where lots of people congregate. And the lady that sells the tomatoes and the potatoes, she usually can read a bit of English. She would then come to the rescue of the English professor and help him understand English by explaining what cataglottism, for example, would mean to him. And he would pay her R5 and she would be very happy. So I haven't got that far yet. Your work, which is called Kring van Kennis, is a baby of this thinking. Ulot Triges has a long history, anthropologically speaking people were divided in these categories by the shape of their skulls, the shape of their faces. They would be prognathous and orthognathous and dolichocephalous, and depending on whether they had long pointed skulls or flat noses. We come from a long history of discrimination in a linguistic sense. So I wanted to poke great fun at all of this. I wanted to turn everything upside down and make joy. Ecdysis, a snake shedding of its skin. H.L. Mencken said that it is actually a striptease when a woman starts taking off layer upon layer. She's performing ecdysis. Onolatry is in the Oxford. Onos is a donkey. Latrei means to worship. Similarly, idolatry means the worship of idols. But onolatry comes from the Crusaders. And, I sort of discovered the shit that they had been causing all around the world, so I started shooting at them as well. I started shooting at everybody that I didn't like. And onolatry, they said these people from Islam, they wouldn't convert to Christian even if we threatened them to cut their bloody heads off. They are onolatrous, they just worship donkeys. They made it up, but it's stuck into the Oxford Dictionary till this day. So there's a lot of social history in the etymology of the Oxford. I'm a pogonotrophist, by the way, and most of you are pogonotomists. If you had a lobotomy, your head would be cut open. Tomotomy in Greek means to cut, and lobotomy means to cut the lobe of your head so you can peep into your brain. But if you do a pogonotomy, you cut your beard, which is what most men tend to do to some extent. I don't do that. So the words became me over time. You can go down the list. Matoid appeals to me very much, but being both brilliant and a bit crazy. I sometimes think I'm a bit matoid. And to apprecate, one's girlfriend tends to do that. She would, it's closely related to the word apricot. She sits in the sun until the skin begins a little bit glowing, rosy color and looks more sexy. Agnoiology, the science of ignorance. Catalate. In the blind alphabet, I made all these shapes, and one of them is a Bathocolpian shape. A Bathocolpian means that you have a deep bosom. Bathos means deep, and colpos means breast, chest. But the Oxford English Dictionary was written by naughty men. And instead of making it deep-chested, they turned it into big-breasted. It means similarly the same thing, I think. So I had to make this sculpture of a torso of a woman with rather large breasts. And blind men, of course, can't see pictures in magazines. They can only hear what people tell them, things people look like if they don't have clothes on. But in my sculpture, especially the Bathocolpian sculpture and the Callipygian sculpture, which is having beautiful buttocks, you find blind men standing around those sculptures a lot, grinning and fondling them. Anyway, contractation is interesting. Skiamaki is what I do all the time. I can't sleep very well, then I fight with the shadows. So I wanted to do these 10 walls, but instead they landed up on your doorstep as 11 stones. That's the blind alphabet. It's made for blind people to have fun, and for sighted people to drool over. So that is bicipitus and bicaudal. Bicaudal having 2 tails and bicipitus having 2 heads. It's slightly inspired by old Joachim Schoenfeld. Joachim made these cows with more than 1 head. And blind people, of course, have no access to those works. So I made a sculpture every now and again, trying to talk about other people's sculpture. Boshof, Don. the lions of an ox. This one is caducity. Cadere in Latin means to fall. And some fruit fall earlier in the season, fall from their trees earlier. Other fruits, say for example, fall later. So the caducity in some fruit is all leaves. They leave the leaves, for example, on the some of the ash trees, for example, they go yellow much earlier and the leaves fall off earlier. The caducity on those leaves would be earlier. They are caducous earlier. And some other trees like the jacarandas, they only lose their leaves. The caducity only sets in late in the season. But it means things fall off, caducity. So I made this naughty thing, which it looks like that when the blind person encounters it, but if he pulls the little plug, it pokes down like that. And so it goes up and down. But it is a bit suggestive. And there's the calapigian over which the men would, and the pelocorpian. I think I use these slightly vulgar, banal examples because they stick. You know, cilia in Latin, or a cilium rather, would be an eyelash. This little thing that comes out when you pull on your upper eyebrow. And many eyelashes would be cilia. Now, supra in Latin is on top and infra is below. Now, if you link the supra or the super with an eyelash, you get supercilious. And if you walk around in such a way as that you project the upper sides of your eyelashes to people like this, you look a little bit haughty and affected by social, by your impression of your own social standing. You become supercilious. They found it in the morphology of the face. Choroid, it looks like a paper bag. Johan will tell us what a choroid is. It's the sac in which the fetus is shaped more like a bean or it's curled up. But there's a big sac around it, protecting it, called a chorion, I think. I'm not sure. But it has feeders, vascular feeders in and out of it, and I think it becomes the afterbirth. Am I? No. So, but you have never seen such a thing. So in a certain, very real sense of the word, you are blind to what goes on in the human body, male or female. But it's, blind people are even more so. That's their whole life. They can't see a thing. They can't see the clouds, can't see what pictures in books, can't see paintings. The writing that fell off the wall. That was immediately after the blind alphabet I did this. I thought I must find all those things that are so biblical, liberating to Africa. So I found the things. The truth shall set you free. So I had the one is truth, order, and there are 14 of them. And I thought of the 14 stations of the cross. And I made them fall off the wall, all of them. They, as if they had been written substantially on a wall, they'd come undone. There's a story about, everybody knows the story maybe, about there was a time when we had the land and the white man had the Bible. White man had the truth. Now we have the truth and the white man has the land. That's one of the texts from Kring van Kennis. It's the work on the campus. So they asked me to make a sculpture because the university wanted to show that they really mean business with change, and that they wanted a new dispensation, and that the past would be buried and gone. It was the year 2000. And they wanted to go into a new millennium. So I made this stuff. And sandblasted it on stone. And I've worked with pebbles a lot. Now, in this work, these ologies and isms, you can see some of them there. They're crazy. Nobody knows these words. I just wanted to make some great and grand fun with all the academic baggage that we've been carrying. Tegestology, the collection and the science of beer mats. I mean, that's great. Why should there be such a thing? And there are all these things that you learn at university that are so mind-blowing. I wanted to have the university look at itself a little bit less, more confrontational, but remember the fact that they are down to earth and we all the same. So I made these weird and wonderful, crazy words. And the stones, each one weighs 3 tons and more. So the rugby team, all the players in the rugby team can't gather around it to pick it up. It's too heavy. So I wanted to say that there was a time when we threw stones at each other, but the stones are so heavy and so full of shit, nobody can pick them up. And we must sit on them and actually talk. And then I made a sister work to this work. This work is full of the ologies and the isms. And the sister work was made in the opposite material. Stone is very hard, and if you engrave something on a stone, it's permanent. But then I wanted to write in sand, because we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission at that time. And I wanted to show that if you really forgive somebody, it's like writing in the sand. If whatever you write there doesn't last for more than a day or two, then the wind blows it away. And forgiveness must set in if we want to get somewhere. So I made the same ologies and isms in stone and in sand. And then it was selected for the Havana Biennale, and it went there. And we made these 2 pages on opposite sides of this exhibition hall of the ologies and isms in all our languages. This is in France. I didn't get any money from the NAC to go to Havana. Then I really, really battled to make the work from sand in Havana because there are only pebbles there. I thought that there would be sand. And so eventually we made the work. And the British Council, they give millions to their artists, millions of pounds. I mean, there's whole teams and people working on it, and the selection, the Germans do that. The Americans don't go to Havana, they hate the place. But I got nothing, and I made this strange thing out of the cheapest material I could find, which was sand, which was the opposite of the stone I'd been working with. So I wanted to show that if you really need forgiveness, at the end of such a session, this is in, the strange thing is this thing went all over the world. It was in Denmark, in France, in Washington. This is Denmark. At the end of it all, it's just gone. Whatever is written there, the wind will blow it away, or people will. So I think that's kind of the spirit of forgiveness, is that it doesn't stay. The thing that is heavy, there should be a way in which it could pass. The wind should blow it away. These are some other stone pieces. This is called Penelope's distaff. It has the story of Penelope unraveling the funeral shroud. Her husband was the general Odysseus. He was at war with Troy, and his father died, and just when they got married. So he left to go and fight, and she stayed behind. And in the camp, all the soldiers of the camp saw this beautiful woman who had just got married, sitting there by herself in the house. So he would come past and see her there. And they wanted to talk to her, to console her. They called the suitors. And then she would be knitting the funeral shroud for the father-in-law who had just died. But then she got scared because she knew what they really wanted was more than just to console her. They wanted to probably have an affair. And then she would make an excuse to say to them, let me finish the shroud and maybe I'll talk to you. And she carry on knitting this. And then she gets close to the end of it and she panics because now she has to talk to them. Then she unravels the whole thing and starts all over again. And then when they get there, oh God, this woman's going to never finish. They all got into serious trouble when Odysseus got back. So I made a seat for women to sit on when they contemplate the things of a woman. And these are the children of the stars. You and I are supposed to be stardust. And they asked me, what would I do on the I fell to the west if I had a chance? So I said, I want to make black rocks that look like they fell out of the night sky. And that's what this is all about. It's to commemorate the Vredefort asteroid, because I think without the Vredefort asteroid, I wouldn't have had to give the speech because I wouldn't have been here. And I made a seat for this one. There's 6 of these stones. This is 2 of them. And they have the story of how different languages originated. So it's full of what happened since the stone fell at Vredefort, fell out of the sky. That's another one. And another one. And that is called Thinking Stone at the Free State University. It weighs about 20 tons. And it's for the students to sit on. And it commemorates the oldest university in South Africa, which I believe to have existed at Driekops-Eiland, where you find about 3,000-4,000 ideoglyphs. Strange, wonderful carvings in the rock of a people that had lived 2,000 or more years ago, who had made these carvings that still to this day we have no idea what they mean. They were made over a long period of time, and people were taught, and a tradition was established and continued for time. And it's very much the same as we have in the West. We talk about a campus. The word campus means field, because the older learning institutions were in the open field under a tree, and people were taught. I think this was an absolutely ideal campus. So I commemorate that ancient university, and I want this upstart of a young university, the UFS, the University of the Free State, to remember that it's only just started. That this 2,000-year-old university, full of these ideoglyphs, wonderful engravings. Not 2 of them are the same. They were made with great attention to originality in each and every one. I can't get over the fabulousness of this. So I got suckered into bringing homage to an older university. Before I go any further, very fine. When did we start? It's about an hour almost. I don't want to go too far down the road here because I get into trouble as I go on. Because some of the work that I make are a little more terrorist and like linguistic terrorist, making trouble. This work, there wasn't the idea of it. On the top you have names, and those names are reflected right at the bottom. And then you have the 5 monarchs of the 20th century. But I made this work in response to the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. And because no sooner had exactly 1 century elapsed, or the collateral damage was the result of both the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, as well as the Anglo-Boer War. So in this case, the idea was to find the 2,000 or close to 2,000 names of children that died not very far from my grandfather's farm, where the people from his area would have been put in a concentration camp. That was one of the most interesting things to discover, that the very first Jewish person who ever died in a concentration camp died in Butuli concentration camp in the Anglo-Boer War, on the side of the Boers. And it's not a thing that goes down very well, because everybody says the Holocaust is for the Second World War. But a Holocaust means, holos means everything, all, totally, and kaustos means to burn. And it comes from the ancient Greek times, when sacrifices were made, where everything was given and burnt in honor and respect of the gods. They all, for example, if they only burnt the horses, they would call it a hippocaust. Now, in the Anglo-Boer War, all the houses, 30,000 houses, with the exception of none, were totally burnt. All the horses were burnt, all the cattle, all the chickens. So you cannot escape the fact that it is a total burning, in a very real sense of the word. But people don't like talking about it because there's a monopoly on the word Holocaust. So I thought I should just maybe try and show the names of the people that my grandfather knew, the children under 15. And that's the work. So on the ceiling you will have 1,600 and a few more names of children under 15 that he might have known many of. He wouldn't have known all of them. But they died in Butuli, not far from his farm. And they are written back to front and upside down. If you look at them, they are fucked. They are, shall I say that again? They are because you can't read them. But if you look in the mirror on the floor, you can read them quite clearly, because the mirror inverts them. And there they are, they're fine. They're not. But then, these people, the monarchs, who never apologized for doing that, that seems to have escaped their attention completely, the 5 of them, since those kids died, I put them with great respect for your attention, so that they are seen for exact. And then at the bottom of each one there is a little story about when they were crowned and what had happened to them. But if you look at them in the same mirror, they are so the kids are okay there, in that faraway place, on the other side of God knows what. The kings and the queens are and the kids are fine. So I started doing these weird things. So this work was exhibited in Denmark, in Bloemfontein, in Joburg, and there is talk that we can maybe show it near the Buckingham Palace. Somebody's working on that, so I hope it will work. And then maybe I should stop with this. I don't know how much time I've gone over. You must click your clicker. I don't know. Abamfusa Lavula. I've done a lot of these weird. In this case, you see these people near Parliament, next to that church in Cape Town, on the 2nd of September 1989. Because what happened, the police would have this wagon with a tank and a water cannon, but inside the tank would be a purple dye. And around here there are lots of these BBC people and CNN people and Sky people. They are filming the whole thing. And if the police do something silly with anyone, if they catch anyone, that's next morning it's on CNN, and the police are seen to be terrible and all that. So in this instance, the police were spraying everybody purple. Then afterwards, when everybody's dispersed, they go look for the purple people and put them in jail. And then somehow somebody managed to jump on the wagon and grab hold of the spray gun, and spray the police purple. And the next morning on the subways, they had written, "The purple shall govern," which is from the African Charter, the people shall govern. So I made the work Abamfusa Lavula. I went around looking for slogans from the struggle. Nothing was published. And the reason why would be, if you were caught with this piece of paper with some of this stuff written on it, they would put you away in jail for a long time. You couldn't afford to carry your little hymn book of struggle songs with you. It couldn't be done because people would be, if they catch you, so everything was committed to memory. The African oral tradition, which we speak about so much, came into its own because in the struggle, everything was spontaneous and sung at the spur of the moment. And these were the songs. And that thing on the far right is the work I made. And what I did was to take the struggle songs that I had collected, because I had to go from person to person and write it down myself. I think maybe somebody had published it by now. But then, in those days, in 1996 or 7, when I made this thing, there was nothing. So I found all the stuff, and also I found the translations of each struggle chant. Now what you see there is, of course, the chant itself. You can read it. And if you are black, you don't have to go and stand right up against the work to read it. You can stand far away from it and you can still see what, you can still read it. So my subversive tendency in this work is to position the black visitor to the gallery far away from the work, because it's easy for them to read it from far away. But you and I, most of us who are white, who can't figure out what the hell these weird things mean, and who are scared by them, I give you a translation, but I give it to you very small, right up against the work. Like that. So you have to put your noses to the work itself if you want to read it. And in this way I am positioning you in such a way so that these black people far away are watching your backs. So I'm making a bit of naughtiness and stuff. So. And there are slats that run from top to bottom, suggesting the drum beat or the boom, 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 boom. There. Boo. I think that's if you want to ask, I think ask questions. I don't know what, I'm a bit nonplussed as to what happened now. I've made so many works. There are days and days of slides that I could show you. You can check it out on the website. There's a website if you really wanted to see what I've been up to. Some of it's very naughty and has to do with international politics and the war in Iraq and Iran. And other, whenever I get really, really sleepless at night and feel I should be doing something about this, then I make trouble. Thanks.